Hello. My name is Javi Marcos. I am the administrator of Los Terrenos. It's the biggest website in Spanish language about A Song of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon, all the ideas of the world created by George R. R. Martin. It's the biggest website in the world, just behind Westeros.org. And I am going to do a recorded video now with a good friend, a friend who lives in Austria, that is for me the most significant academical expert in A Song of Ice and Fire, because he has done something that I have never met anyone, something that has done anything like that. Because this guy, Christoph Doppelhofer, has done an amazing PhD focus on the topic of this video, the cultural heritage of Game of Thrones filming. Christoph, welcome here.
Hi, Harvey.
Oh,
Glad to be here, and it's been quite a while since we've seen each other in person, thanks to pandemic and stuff.
hmm.
But it's great to finally connect again.
Oh, yes. Christoph and I met in 2000. Well, we were talking before online, but we met in person in, I think the only time we have met each other in person.
Yeah.
It was 2019 before the pandemic when in Sevilla in Spain, two universities of Spain, two universities from Sevilla, Universidad de Sevilla and Universidad Pablo de la Vide, they created an very, for me it was astonishing too, the best like academical, very focused congress from people from universities all across Europe, focused on Game of Thrones and A Song of Ice and Fire, considering the point of view of the humanities. And they had people from all different types of studies of humanities, not just social studies, but also like architectural, archaeological, translation, historian, of course, philosophers. They had a crazy amount of people from a crazy amount of countries. I just participated in a very small panel with Elian Linda talking about the cultural impact of Game of Thrones. But you were there, Christoph, talking about more or less your topic, your expertise, your PhD. What did you talk about in Sevilla?
I am looking at the filming locations of Game of Thrones. As many of our listeners and viewers will know that Game of Thrones used extensive amount of on-location filming. They filmed in Northern Ireland, in Spain, in Croatia, in Malta, Iceland, and Morocco. So all across Europe and Northern Africa, and they used whole lot of different cultural heritage sites. And when I say cultural heritage sites, I mean Roman ruins, historic cities, medieval castles. That's one of the great appeals of Game of Thrones, that it has such a it adds to the realism. It shows that Westeros is a real place in the world. And at some point, as so often happens, I had a great idea in the pub and was kind of thinking, thinking with a couple of friends. So I'm constantly, my background is in archaeology and heritage studies. So there was a big question of how authentic are heritage sites, and then how authentic is the experience that we have when we go and visit great monuments and landscapes and architecture. I thought everybody is currently going to those Game of Thrones locations, and how authentic is the feeling of going to Westeros and to Essos. And out of this casual conversation, this kind of thought experiment, a whole PhD proposal and basically a whole dissertation came out of this.
I think I can share the PhD that you were so good to send me in the past. When did you started your PhD and when did you finish it?
I started in 2017. It was at Durham University. It was an interdisciplinary study in visual culture. So I was supervised by experts in geography, history, and archaeology. So I'm trying to like take various different influences methodologically, theoretically, and try to make a very like broad study to understand this phenomenon of people visiting uh, cultural heritage sites associated with Game of Thrones. Um, and I finished this just early this year, last year. I actually finished it last year, and I graduated in January of this year, 2023. So it's actually quite freshly available online and for everybody free to read, actually. So we can share the link to this in the description,
Excellent.
probably.
Excellent. Yes.
It should be, I try to be not too specific with my wordings, so it should be quite accessible, and it has a lot of wonderful images and illustrations in it, so it's also very pretty to look at. But we'll glance over the whole dissertation today in this video, so you can get a kind of feel for it, what you can expect.
So you were saying before how you got the idea of this project in a pub. I want, because you're an Austrian guy, I want to ask you how many beers had you drunk before you had this idea, because you are from a country that is specialized in beer, so you have another level of resistance of beer, about drinking beers.
It's been quite late, so I don't know, but again,
You
I
live, you
drink
live,
and I
you drink
drink
and
and I
you know
know
things.
things.
And you live now in Czech Republic, that also is, they are experts in creating good beer. So I think that's a good place for
Yeah.
you to be too. And you said how you got this idea, but and you were talking before about this, how Game of Thrones is a social phenomenon, a cultural phenomenon. It was the most popular. I think it's the show that has reached the biggest popularity in the world. Of course, we were talking about this, and there were a lot of interviews when Game of Thrones was ending. Will any show be like Game of Thrones? And we say no, there won't be a show like Game of Thrones, because a lot of new networking companies has started. The streaming wars concept appeared, and in the streaming wars there are so many companies creating shows and movies, and they are competing with each other in this war. Because when Game of Thrones was in his prime, there was just Game of Thrones. Now HBO is creating his product, but Netflix is creating their product, Amazon Prime Video is creating their product, traditional TV media in US is creating their product, Disney with a lot of money is creating their product, Apple TV with investing every year more money is creating their product. So we have a lot of actors creating a lot of products, and there is a very strong competition, and it's almost impossible for a show to surpass the rest of the competition of the streaming wars and be considered the show that you have to be watching right now, because there is a strong of competition. I remember when House of the Dragon was airing last year. In the same week, we had a Game of Thrones show, House of the Dragon. We had a Lord of the Rings show, Rings of Power. We had a Marvel show the same week. I think it was She-Hulk, and we had an Star Wars show, Andor. It was crazy, but we have four of the most popular intellectual properties in popular culture: Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, and Marvel comics, launching a new episode every week. It was crazy. So with that strong competition, even if those products have not the same quality of House of the Dragon, it's very hard to be the only one, to be the show, capital letters. So do you think that Game of Thrones is like is the Swan's last song? It will be the last big show ever?
It's very of its time, and there is a bit of a debate if this is a singular event, because the last decade was just dominated by Game of Thrones and nothing else. Of course, you had the Marvel films on the side, but there was nothing that was dominating the pop cultural discourse like Game of Thrones did. And a part of the success was, of course, that it's this serialized format to have like 10 weeks of a year being dominated by that, but people theorizing online and so on and so forth. It was at the advent of the big streaming services where everybody started like getting into video streaming, where everybody even if you didn't have HBO where you lived, it was always Game of Thrones that was on the piracy websites. It's number one. I think season 7, each episode was pirated about 130 million times is the estimate. So it was like a billion illegal downloads just for that one season.
Mm.
And it is very much, it's so culturally ingrained. If you would go down a bit further in my dissertation, in the first chapter, I try to make a point that it is a pop cultural phenomenon that has not been seen before. Of course, we have Lord of the Rings, which was since 2000, the early 2000s, is kind of the pop cultural IP in movie wise, and also with film
Mm.
tourism. But um, there was no streaming at that point. There was no social media, and thanks to social media, what you will see is that everybody started sharing memes, and it's the same with right now when you see what memes are shared. Is with The Last of Us. It's currently the only show where or last year. House of the Dragons is The Last of Us, is like House of the Dragon, where memes are shared. And I would say when you see which product dominates the memes, you know which one is the most influential one.
Mm.
I don't know any meme of the Lord of the Rings shows, for example,
Well,
but I know
I
several
know memes,
ones.
but those memes were attacking the show
Yeah,
most
yeah,
of the time. But in those two products, The Last of Us, that I love it, and House of the Dragon, say the same thing. They are inheriting the good work of the original. In the case of The Last
yeah,
of Us, of course, the video games that sold crazy, like, I don't know, 40, 50 million of copies. It was a very, very popular franchise. I think even more than 40 or 50 million. I have to check it later. And of course, House of Dragon is the
yeah,
first, not the only one, the first spin-off of Game of Thrones. So they were sitting in the shoulders of giants, both of them. So,
yeah,
and also they were very good shows created by HBO that has the expertise in show. But for example, I love Succession. For me, Succession is the best show I have seen in half a decade, maybe. But it's not ingrained in popular culture. This
yeah,
week, when we are recording this, Brian Cox, that is maybe the face of Succession, is the Logan Roy, maybe the main character of the show, was in Madrid. And I would say that 95% of the people doesn't know who Brian Cox is or Logan Ryan is. If
yeah,
Daenerys Targaryen, if Emilia Clarke came to Madrid, half of the people at least would know, oh, she's from that dragon show, something like that. The difference in popular cultural impact, it's
yeah,
astonishing. It's
yeah.
total different worlds.
If you go on page 27, you can basically see the impact that Game of Thrones has on popular culture. Yeah, exactly. You just missed it.
What
27. Yeah,
page
you
is
just
it?
missed it. 27.
Okay. I because
Yeah,
I am I don't know if it was the page of the
yeah.
PDF or the page. Here
Yes.
it
No,
is.
no, no.
Oh
Page
yeah.
27 of the PDF.
I
So
love this
yeah,
one. I love this one.
exactly. So you can really see it is in every single way Game of Thrones has been put into into media. It's referenced in The Simpsons, in Parks and Rec. There was a Jeopardy episode, a session where they focused just on Game of Thrones. They even in the Sesame Street.
Mm.
And they have like side quests in games like Borderlands that are basically just a recreation or a parody of Game of Thrones. So
Mm.
this is just like this all-encompassing thing. If you go 2 pages down, you see how first of all, you have this blood. You have an advertisement for donating blood. You have to bleed for the throne. For the American Red Cross, you have Game of Thrones themed weddings. Although I don't know who would want to do that with the track records of weddings. You have Donald Trump declaring sanctions on a different country by sharing a Game of Thrones meme, more or less. So you can see that the Game of Thrones is geopolitical. So
No,
you can
and
see,
it's totally transversal, because when I did my panel in Sevilla with Elia Linda, I put posters like this, but of Spanish politics, but of four different parties of four different ideologies, and the four of them use Game of Thrones references.
yeah, and there are new animal species that are discovered. They will have the names of the dragons of Daenerys. So
Yes.
it is just so much in in every aspect of life. And even if you haven't seen the show, you know of it and you know the visual language of it. And that is what fascinated me about it. And because I am from a cultural heritage background, I wanted to see how this impacts the filming locations. And it impacts them quite substantially. It's not only that they're now guided tours, it's not that they sell merchandise there. People use actually the names King's Landing for Dubrovnik. They use Winterfell for Castle Ward in Northern Ireland. And it has a really big cultural impact, how those places are seen. And in very unexpected ways, which we can talk later about. But just to take some things ahead from that, because many people like did not know many of the places that Game of Thrones has been filmed, and now they're major tourist destinations. Northern Ireland, before Game of Thrones was put on the map, was mainly known for the violence of the troubles of the Northern Ireland conflicts for decades. And what it did, it kind of showed a different side of the country, and this is one of the most amazing aspects of my research.
Yeah, yeah. You, of course, you were focused in the places where Game of Thrones was filmed. It was filming in Northern Ireland. It was filming in Spain. It was filming in
Yeah.
Croatia. It was filming in Malta. It was filming in Iceland. It was filming in Morocco. And they even filmed a scene in the US. They filmed with the scene with Bear the bear. It was filmed Bert the bear that fights with Rian. That film was filmed in US because the bear couldn't travel overseas, of
Yeah.
course. So if this would be a trivial question, I think many people would have failed, because they would say, in how
Yes.
many continents has Game of Thrones has filmed? And it's 3, not 2, considering the
Yeah.
scenes with the bear. But
I think
okay,
most
so
people would just say one because they think it's just Europe. So, but they would
yeah,
forget
yeah, yeah.
about Morocco because it was only in
Yeah,
season
yeah,
3.
yeah, 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 totally. And I, what you studied in this project is what happened in the places where Game of Thrones was had filmed. So what was
Yeah. Okay.
your general impression about this? How impacted very small impressions about how impacted those places, Dubrovnik, Belfast, etc.
Yeah. So if you would go to chapter 4, which is yeah, that's a bit further down the road.
Just keep
That's
talking, keep talking.
yeah. It's basically what happened there. Is various different things. Of course, people will go, okay, we are like at page 78 or something to see one of the first filming locations, of the later filming locations. But what what happened is lots of people just wanted to see the places they've seen on the screen in real life. And that instigated a bunch of different activities. For example, guided tours. People started selling merchandise or inspired products. There's a bit further down, we will see an image of Game of Thrones honey and Lannister gold meat that they're selling close to Old Castle Ward in Northern Ireland. They even there are now even new cultural artifacts. Yeah, you have like interpretation boards you see here, where they put info boards on the filming locations with screenshots and some info what happened here in the show. So Game of Thrones became a physical part of those places. So it's not just like you go there, you just look at some screenshots on your phone. No, the screenshots are there for you to look at. And then some places like Northern Ireland embraced it the most. They even have new artifacts, new monuments built to it. They have the Game of Thrones doors. They are carved out of the wood of the dark hedges, which stood in for the King's Road in season 2, where Arya goes joining the train of the Night's Watch when she flees King's Landing. You see it in I think in the first or second episode, like for 10 seconds. And this has now become one of the most iconic places. And in 2016, a storm blew over a couple of those trees,
Yeah.
and they just carved a couple of wooden doors out of them, and they distributed them across Northern Ireland in 10 pubs. You have a little stamp book where you can go to each and
Oh,
every location and
wow,
can collect the stamps, which I, of course, did when I did
wow.
my research there. You
Of
can, that's
course.
probably a bit further down. And then you also have the Glass of Thrones. They have like big glass windows, look like cathedral windows, and they're spread all over Belfast. Um,
Mm. Do
and
you
the
have
last
pictures
thing
of that?
is I have pictures of that. It's all in there. Yeah, here are a couple of images how it looks now in Old Castle Ward, where they have where they filmed Winterfell for the first season.
Mm.
So they have now activities where you can dress up. They have an annual Winterfell festival. It doesn't take place anymore. It was between I think in 2018 and 19 it took place, and after that pandemic hit, of course. But they really tried to exploit this economically, and you can really daily here at Inch Abbey
This is
that
the place
was
you were talking
yeah,
about, the King's
exactly,
Road. Yeah,
exactly. That is the King's Road. 10 seconds you could see
yeah.
it, and now it's completely packed, which is also a bit of a problem because this road is under heavy pressure now, and it's now forbidden to drive through there because it would damage the roots of the trees. So there's actually some danger of over tourism because now all of a sudden everybody wants to go there. Even people who haven't watched Game of Thrones, it's now become one of the main attractions of Northern Ireland. Nobody knew it before Game of Thrones.
Oh,
Um, yeah,
uh,
and yeah,
it's crazy. No, it's crazy. No. And you were really focused in studying in your PhD. That of course is a very long PhD. We won't cover 350 pages of the PhD.
yeah, it's a bit lot. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. But you were trying to look at how this fan culture of related to visiting the place where your favorite show has been filmed, or even a show you have not even seen, as you were saying before, and how this location change, how they expand, how changes the identity of those cities. For example, people may want to visit a very famous location and historical. For example, Italica in Spain.
yeah,
Italica is a city that is 2,000 years old. That is famous because it's a Romans lived there. The biggest empire of the world was there, and now people doesn't want to visit it because because those are Roman ruins. People want to visit it because it's where Game of Thrones was filmed. It's crazy. It's crazy, and people would not believe it if you explain them that. So how changed that of course the tourist impact of the locations, what we were talking before about
hmm
that road that represented the King's Road, and of course also the idea of you were talking before in the chat before we start recording this. So you said about a split becoming marine, for example, how real story merged with fictional story of Game of Thrones. So that was more or less your like the general idea about this PhD,
yeah.
no?
I mean, Split is a special place in my heart anyway because when I studied archaeology, then one of my favorite emperors was Diocletian, who was a Roman emperor in the late third century, who basically just after 100 years of civil war, kind of unified the empire again. Yeah, this is Cleese. This is a bit behind Split, but Split itself is a harbor town, and now it's built on the foundations of a Roman palace at the late third century, and the basement of that palace was where Daenerys kept the dragons. And I knew Split before I before Game of Thrones was a thing, and I was already impressed by it. But when I visited again after Game of Thrones was filmed in Split, the whole place kind of felt differently to me because I had like a different association with it, and I looked at places that I didn't look at before. I mean, I was of course in the basement there, but now it was also the place where Daenerys kept her dragons, or where Barristan Selmy got ambushed and killed by the Sons of the Harpy. So there's like an additional layer of significance and importance and some emotional connection um, added to this place. And this is what I could see in every location that I visited. For example, in Dubrovnik, it is a magnificent Renaissance harbor town. It's been a republic. It's between east and west, north and south. It's been an independent place between empires. Very much, if you describe it, is actually in real life, you could actually describe it more or compare it to Kath, because it was also ruled by a it was a merchant republic ruled by 13 aristocrats, and they were basically rich beyond belief. And also between east, west, north, and south. But now everybody thinks that it's King's Landing, because Dubrovnik is a small little place on the Balkans. The Balkans generally don't have the best reputation. But because it was on Game of Thrones, because it was on the biggest show in the world, everybody saw, oh, there are actually really pretty places on the Balkans. When you say Balkans or Eastern Europe, you have a certain image in your mind. And Game of Thrones kind of changed that. And now there are more and more and more people realizing that, coming there, and they start seeing King's Landing, and they naming it King's Landing also because we'll see this in the following chapters, maybe when we get to it, where people just reenact the Walk of Shame. They stand on these chairs, they get their photo taken from behind, and then they walk down. They say shame, shame, shame. They have a little app on their phone where they ring the bell, and some people even do it completely naked.
Wow,
I haven't
that's
shared a
crazy.
photo of that. I haven't shared a photo of that in there. If you Google it, you'll find it. I don't.
Wow, crazy.
But this is also a bit of an issue, because when people do that, and this is a church there. So there is
Yeah.
like a Jesuit church. There are nuns. It's a functioning church, and the clergy, the nuns, are really, really cross and really livid when this happens. So they're really annoyed by
I,
it,
I,
because
I
it's of
totally
course really
understand them.
offensive.
I would like to have naked people running around my street also.
Yeah, and it is the people of Dubrovnik are very proud, because they have a long, strong history. They've been always independent, and they have always tried to be independent from outside forces. And currently, they fear that they're a bit conquered by the perception of the tourists from outside. They're a bit there's kind of like this imperialism of imagination happening, where King's Landing is taking over Dubrovnik. And I have a couple of tour guides. They all guide Game of Thrones tours, and at least half to 60% of all the tours that they guide are Game of Thrones tours, where they show screenshots, and then they compare and contrast. They show how it was in the show, what happened there. But they feel very conflicted about it, because on the one hand, they make a lot of money with it. On the other hand, they'd rather would have other people come and just appreciate Dubrovnik for what it is. And they really try to kind of downplay the impact of Game of Thrones very often. Also the officials. I also talked with tourism officials, with the mayor, and they really try to keep Game of Thrones away from any publicity as any way, shape, or form possible. They actually had a previous government that really wanted to reinforce Game of Thrones on the city. So they took Lord of the Rings tourism as a template. So they wanted everything Game of Thrones. They also started a small little exhibition, which is still in place, which is still on a little island on Locum, just a 15-minute ferry ride in an old monastery. But they do not advertise it officially, because they don't want to have to do anything with it, because they think that Dubrovnik is so much more than King's Landing. And the current government has been elected on the promise that they would reduce tourism, because Dubrovnik is really struggling with the amount of tourism that it gets, in part also because it got so much exposure through Game of Thrones.
Yeah, but Game of Thrones was not the first phenomenon that created attracted tourists. You want to go to a place because that place is connected to that thing that you love. And in your investigation, you were also talking about literature and also film tourists. Sound of Music on I think on Switzerland, Switzerland, and also of course for me the most known Lord of the Rings in New Zealand. I want to go to
Yeah.
New Zealand just because Lord of the Rings was filmed there. So you also explore
Yeah.
that in your PhD.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is to establish a bit of a background. Of course, Game of Thrones has not invented film tourism or screen tourism or
Mm,
media tourism. There is like a whole bunch of different terminology that is used.
mm,
What is the extent of it is new, but as you
mm,
say, there were other things that have happened before. In literature, if you go basically as far back as antiquity, people were looking for places that they read about. In the
mm.
18th, 19th century, people wanted to go and visit Troy because they read the Iliad, they read Homer,
Oh,
and this was
mm,
also a reason why they wanted to go there. Yeah, this is a wonderful example. This is the castle where they filmed Monty Python and the Holy Grail. That's Doune Castle
mm,
in Scotland. It
mm,
is just another Scottish castle if you
mm,
would not have Monty Python and the Holy Grail attached to it. But now it is the castle where Monty Python and the Holy Grail was filmed, and now it's special. Now it sets itself apart from the other Scottish castles. And
mm.
a little bit of trivia: the first season of Game of Thrones was actually Doune Castle stood in for Winterfell in the unaired pilot.
Oh,
So they
in the
actually
pilot
filmed.
In the pilot that was not air,
Was not aired,
they filmed there.
yeah, they filmed there. They filmed there, and they filmed in the Great Hall. And the Great Hall that you see in the show until now, or basically
Mm,
for the entirety of the series, is a recreation of the
mm,
Great Hall of Doune Castle.
mm.
Um,
Oh,
and you mentioned the Sound of Music. That's actually in
yes.
Austria, so where I'm from, in
Oh,
Salzburg.
also, I thought it was, but the film takes place in Switzerland. I don't know.
No,
I
no,
know
no,
it's
no. They filmed in
it
Salzburg. They filmed in
oh,
Austria, and
oh, mm,
it has been filmed in 1965, and to
mm,
this day, if
mm,
you want to believe the tourist board
mm.
of Salzburg, there's still 300,000
Wow,
visitors coming to Salzburg every year just
wow,
because of the Sound of Music, and also
wow.
in Salzburg, you have these walking tours and you have souvenir shops where you can buy
Mm.
merchandise for that.
Oh, but I am checking here other famous location, real life location connected to popular culture phenomenon.
Yeah.
Is the Comte de Monte Cristo, very famous book
Yeah, this is very interesting.
By Dumas, the
Yeah,
French
that
writer.
it's very interesting because this hole that they made there, they made this after the book was written and people started coming to this prison island,
Mm,
um, and to make the story that Alexandre Dumas wrote more convincing, they dug a hole into the wall.
mm,
Just to make it appear that the Count of Monte Cristo was actually there.
mm,
So it is actually the fabric of the castle, of the cultural heritage site, have been altered to fit the fiction. And this
mm.
is this is a fascinating thing that you have the heritage site, then some fiction happens there, then the heritage site adapts to the fiction.
Yeah, yeah. Why money? Tourism. It's most of the time when you ask why something happens, the answer is money. Most of the time, and I have
Yes.
been there. I have been here in the Sherlock Holmes Museum in London. I think I did enter the museum because I think it was a bit expensive, but I was in the shop because it was free to visit the shop, and
Yeah.
I bought I like a magnet for also or a key ring. I think I bought both, and I took a card. So if I have a problem, I have a card in my wallet that says, "Oh, Sherlock Holmes, private private detective," or something like that. So I can give to the other to the other guy. And I have been also here too, in of course in London.
Yeah, of
Then
course.
I think every Harry Potter fan that has been in London has visited this place. It's very small. It's very small. There is always a long queue to take a picture then. but it's very
Yeah,
famous. It's very
people
famous.
people are queuing for it, and it's now part of the heritage of King's Cross Station, and it's
Mm.
entirely fictional. And to be fair, this is not only in the real in the proper location. It's just in the hall in the train
Yes, yes,
in the
yes.
hall.
It's not in the in a real platform.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah.
on the real place. Yeah, so we
Yeah,
see
yeah.
like it happened. See, we talk like it happened, and
Mm.
this is kind of the point that I'm making. And it is still. I mean, the problem is you cannot. It's very hard to determine why people do this. There's a lot
Mm.
of media studies out there that say it's because it's so visual. It is a shared kind of a shared phenomenon because many people do it. You get some you kind of the desire is created to see it with your own eyes. I mean, this is the same thing with like general tourism. If you see a
Mm.
lot of photos on Instagram of the same kind of location over and over again, oh, I actually want to go there and want to take the
Yes.
exact same photo. Although you could just Google the photo if you really just want that photo, but you want to be there and to do it yourself. You wanna. This is a kind of a part of the shared human experience, at least of the modern human experience, where you go to places, take the photo. This is part of the tourist performance. And now part of the tourist performance of all those Game of Thrones locations is to do Game of Thrones stuff. You go on a Game of Thrones tour. You reenact the Walk of Shame. You go and visit the dire wolves. If we go into chapter 5, you see what I've been doing there.
I am introduction.
Yeah, almost a bit further up, then we're there. Up,
Okay. Oh,
exactly.
with the
So
dogs. Oh, the dog.
absolutely. So I went to did the whole Game of Thrones routine. I met Thor and Odin. Odin unfortunately passed away a couple
Yes,
of
I
years
heard about that.
ago, and you cannot visit the direwolf tour, direwolves anymore. They kind of like they are retired now. So that was also very much of its time. So you could only do this for a short period of time.
Mm.
But you go around, and then you get replicas of the famous swords. And of course, when you go there, they just like give you the give you the coat, the cloak, and then they ask you, okay, so who can tell me what was the name of Eddard Stark's sword? And the person who shouts first ice, who is allowed to hold it, and then you can
Oh.
basically you are the main person, and so you kind of there's like a kind of like a bit of a trying to like stand out and impress your common your other fans, your fellow
Oh.
fans there,
It's a,
and this is just happening
it's a
every day.
very big sword. A very big sword.
Yes, it is, and it's really heavy because like made from real metal here. So it's not
Wow.
just some plastic stuff. So they go for the authentic fantasy, and this is the thing. It's like it feels like you are entering Westeros. You're entering Robb Stark's camp there, and this happens every day. So it's kind of it's just what happens now at these places. People
Mm.
go around constantly. As you see here, we have something from Iceland. So I went to Iceland on a holiday. So we went to the Erie. We went to the Kill the Master. I went to the Kill the Master Street in
The first one is
Split.
Sevilla. The first one is Sevilla. It's the
The
Alcázar.
first one is the Alcázar, exactly. This is Dorne, the Dornish Palace of Sunspear.
Mm.
I went to Ballantoy Harbour, so that is Pike. Then here in the top, this is the courtyard of Winterfell, where everybody came in the first episode,
Mm.
rode in, King Robert and his whole entourage, and then we have the Blackwater Bay on the right there, where Sansa and Littlefinger and Shae stood around and looked at the horizon.
Mm.
And this happens every day, all day long, especially Dubrovnik. I was there once. There were 4 tours simultaneously doing exactly
Wow.
the same thing. Um, and it's just like omnipresent with the merchandise shops and everything. And what is fascinating is that people who are not have not seen Game of Thrones. I talked with people who have not seen Game of Thrones.
Mm.
Um, they also reenact the Walk of Shame because that's just what you do there. So this is
Mm.
Game of Thrones is not the essence of those places.
Mm.
So it is part of their cultural heritage. It doesn't it's not just taking place there. It's literally part of the place.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's part and it's totally changed. So, for your PhD, you traveled to just 3 countries, to Northern Ireland, to Croatia, to Spain,
Yeah.
in Morocco, but they didn't almost film. Iceland, I think, was too far. And but what did you do exactly was I am talking now. I am reading now the bullet points you sent me. You were doing ethnographic fieldwork. You were taking part in tours and interviewing people. And what you find was certain behaviors, social media activities, place names, remainder of location happen in different countries at the same time, thanks to Game of Thrones. Could you explain that?
Yeah, exactly. So ethnographic research, for everyone who doesn't know, is basically immersing oneself in a foreign or in within a culture, and it's always it's a social sciences method where you go and live with the community. And there is also something called an ethnography. So you do an ethnography of your own community through just living with them, describing your own experience. And the point of this is to describe what is this community doing, what are their values, what are their ideas, what is their general behavior. And I, as a fan, went and researched the Game of Thrones fan community at the cultural heritage sites. That means that I was, for me, an auto-ethnographic experience, an auto-ethnographic research. What I did going there as a fan, and did everything that a Game of Thrones fan would do, because this is what I would have done if I went to those places myself. And I've done this in several other places before, because I'm a big fan of pop cultural. Yeah, I mean, you see, this was the first thing that I did in field work. My first day of field work was doing exactly this here, going on the Winterfell tour of Game of Thrones tour of Northern Ireland. And I was deliberately trying to just immerse myself and just not try to think too much about it and just feel it. And then after I've done all that, taking my photos, taking my selfies, writing my Instagram posts and so on, I just started to observe other fans. I started, what are they doing, to also understand what I was doing. I started to approach people who engaged with Game of Thrones stuff when they took part in the tour. If they went to one of the Game of Thrones museums that I found. So there are several museums and attractions around where you can visit.
Oh, we appear here. We appear here.
Oh yeah, we have us here in Italica. Yeah. And there we and I interviewed many fans at sites, but also people who were not fans. I later found out, even though they were doing Game of Thrones stuff. And I was taking lots of photographs, lots of videos, I interviewed tourism, people involved in tourism, policymakers, like government officials, like the mayor and head of tourism and cultural heritage in Dubrovnik, for example. Yeah, this is what I was talking about earlier, the 4 tours at once at Blackwater Bay. So nobody knew that bay before, and now it's one of the main attractions. But also what's very interesting is that everybody calls it Blackwater Bay, even the locals.
Oh.
And this is one of the things that I'm more or less was finding out during my research, that people now start using the fictional names for the real filming locations, which is very interesting. And how this happens is very often through hashtagging. Because you're just like, oh, hashtag King's Landing when you're in Dubrovnik, or at Castleboard, hashtag Winterfell. But you could also geotag your photos. So when you Google, for example, Winterfell on Google Maps, you will be directly directed to Castleboard in Northern Ireland.
Oh, good CEO work for those guys. Oh, it's crazy. And I also, you were there, you mix with the people, you discover some things, you were talking about the tours, and also you went to Spain, of course.
Yes.
Spanish.
Yeah, of course.
And you were talking about rebranding, and you were saying about what did in Osuna, that Salón de Hielo y Fuego, the Tierra de Dragones. Now in Cáceres they are doing is House of Dragon or Game of Thrones, but they film Game of Thrones there, and it's their Cather's City of Dragons, because in Cather's it's also because and do you have something about Cáceres? I'm going to check if you have something about Cáceres. The point is that the saint patron of Cáceres is Cáceres doesn't appear here. You have to do a version 2 for House of the Dragon. The
Yeah,
point
yeah.
is,
I
is
mean,
that
this is yeah.
it's crazy. Yeah, a DLC. If this would be a video game, a DLC of House of the Dragon. And because the patron of Cáceres is Saint George, and Saint George is the saint that kills a dragon. So the image of a dragon has been always connected with the city. So they use this historical traditional connection with dragons to make also the City of Dragons, because House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones, being King's Landing, was filmed there. So that idea of what you said, rebranding a city using the fictional name, is also interesting from a linguistical, original, etymological point of view. It's also very interesting.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. There is a very often the idea or the approach to kind of link the quote unquote real history of the place with the fictional history of the place, and at some point they kind of merge. In Northern Ireland, they try to make the connection between Robb Stark as king in the north and John de Courcy as king in the north, who conquered Ulster in the medieval times, and who built Inch Abbey, where Robb Stark's camp is now located, or like used to be located in the filming. There is a dragon statue in Dubrovnik. There is like with a little like panel where it's a lady with a couple of dragons, and they say, "Oh, this is like Daenerys." So you try to kind of try to put the fantasy into your local narrative. To make it more appealing and more real, and the same with like Dubrovnik being very similar to Kath. But of course, the reason why these historical parallels keep popping up is because George R. R. Martin took a lot of historical inspiration from
Absolutely.
and now it's kind of like the other way around. Like Game of Thrones is not like the history or the cultural heritage sites. I mean, the wall in Game of Thrones is just it's Hadrian's Wall in North England. This is George R. R. Martin said that explicitly, but now Hadrian's Wall is like the wall in Game of Thrones. So you kind of like twist it around. So everything is like Game of Thrones rather than Game of Thrones is like actual historical monuments.
No, absolutely. And
but yeah, you were talking about the rebranding of places,
yes.
and this was particularly interesting in Northern Ireland because they proclaimed themselves Game of Thrones territory. So they really have a complete reimagining of the entire landscape. They have those filming location maps. They have artifacts in museums, like the Game of Thrones tapestry, which is again a reference to the Bayeux tapestry, which shows the conquest of England by the Norman the Conqueror in 1066. And now they basically made a Game of Thrones version of that and exhibited in the National Museum. And they say in the exhibition that Game of Thrones has become part of the culture and heritage of Northern Ireland. So they are integrating it into their collective narrative. It's not only for the visitors who go there, it's also for their own community, that they have like a new heritage narrative that they can explore and express.
No, yeah, that's superb. And but also, and what they did in Cather City of Dragons, one of the panels we did was about the impact of Game of Thrones filming and House of the Dragon filming, and they were talking about they didn't enter a lot in what you said, this social analysis, the cultural heritage analysis. They were talking a lot about economical impact and how it benefited those cities. So could you talk about this, about what was the financial benefit for the cities or for the locations where the show was filmed?
Yeah, this is one of the. It was not my focus, the focus of my research, but of course I had to think about that because this is the first question. Oh yeah, it's tourism, so of course there's some financial benefit. The problem is it is very hard to directly measure how this is, how Game of Thrones directly impacted it economically. There is a pamphlet from the Northern Ireland Tourism Board that says that about 350,000 people pre-pandemic numbers grant you. So we always have to kind of use pre-pandemic numbers. There are new numbers available right now, but 350,000 people per year, which would be a sixth of all kind of like leisure tourism, would come to Northern Ireland because of Game of Thrones and bring about 50 million plus pounds into the local economy. However, when you actually look at certain sites, it's very often not the case that there are now many more people. They're just like a different kind of people. Castle Ward in Northern Ireland, for example, has a big shift in who comes there. There's now a far larger portion of international tourists that go there, and they are probably motivated by Game of Thrones because this is how you would because this is how most people got exposed to it. But generally speaking, because Northern Ireland and Dubrovnik were so much in the media because of Game of Thrones, so it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy that people go there because of Game of Thrones. Yeah, maybe they go because people now talk more about it. So of course there is more tourism happening, but is it really just because of Game of Thrones, or is it just tourism is generally a growing business? I mean, we are now above pre-pandemic levels again because everybody wants to like do extra tourism these days. But it definitely shifted tourism around a bit. So it definitely made certain areas a bit more better visited and more exposed.
Yeah, for me, this is a key point because I'm Spanish, and the biggest industry in Spain is tourism. Tourism is the country with more tourist visitors every year related to coast and beaches locations in the world. And Spain is not US or India or Russia it's smaller than France, it's smaller than Italy, it's smaller. We have or smaller than Germany. Well, Germany has no beaches, of course, but and we have a crazy amount of tourism. It's the first industry. Of course, we do cars. We export a lot of the first sector. You know, the food, and we export a lot of food, a lot of oil, a lot of different kind of food that maybe refined in other countries, like the wine or the oil. But maybe 20% of Spanish people live thanks to tourists, direct or indirectly. In all the Spain is crowded with people from other countries that want to visit our beaches, and luckily also in the last decade also not only the coastal places but also the historical places, the places with hundreds, thousands of years of history, like Cáceres, like Toledo, like Madrid, like Salamanca, where I am from, that they want to visit a country that they want to visit a monument that is 2,000 years old. Because, for example, in the US, you don't have monuments that are 2,000 years old. So for me, it's very, very compelling. And to be honest, why you can do events related to Game of Thrones is because you have to tell to the local authorities that these kind of things will give you money, will give money to the people directly involved, but also to people indirectly involved. Because some people would just go to visit, for example, Cáceres because Game of Thrones or House of Dragon was filmed there. And they will tell that to a friend of them, okay, I went to Cáceres last weekend because Game of Thrones and House of Dragon was filmed there, and I love Cáceres. And maybe that guy who talked with him is not interested at all in House of the Dragon or Game of Thrones, but he wants to visit a new place. He heard good things about Cáceres, and then that people will go to Cáceres. Not because Game of Thrones directly, but indirectly, because a friend of them or a family of them traveled to that city because Game of Thrones was filmed there. The mouth-to-mouth experience, and now, of course, totally multiplied by social media, where you can share where you have been. it's crazy for the tourist sector. And I think you are right that we cannot really measure how big is the impact of tourists, because how many people went to Cáceres thanks to House of Dragon? We know how many people went to Cáceres for the Cáceres City of Dragons event last year. It was around 1,000 people.
Yeah.
But we don't know how many people visit Cáceres after that, because you are not going to do a survey to every single person that visit a city. This is not a this is not a Chinese state where you can like totally control your population. People go around and you don't get questioned by the authorities. Why are you here? Why do you travel here? People just go and return, come and go without knowing why they're here. But many people are there because a friend of them visited that place because Game of Thrones was filmed in that city. That's key. It's, as you said, it's impossible to totally measure, but the real impact is there. And I think we can only check in big data. I think we could only just know the data considering how the number of tourists in a country that is not, or a city that is not crowded with tourists usually, how it has multiplied or doubled in amount of time. For example, I would say an example in Spain, Peñíscola in Comunidad Valenciana in Alicante, where Game of Thrones was filmed, has always had a lot of tourists. So it's impossible to measure how filming in Peñíscola affected Game of Thrones, affected the city, because Peñíscola has always had a lot of tourists.
Yes, exactly.
So we don't know if a city has always a lot of tourists. We
Yeah.
don't know how many of the new tourists came for Game of Thrones, because that place has always has a lot of tourists. But places like Belfast, as you said, like Northern Ireland, maybe even Croatia. Well,
In
was
Croatia,
growing.
there's a wonderful example, which is the Fortress of Klis, which is like where Marine has been filmed. It's
Yes.
like this wonderful castle on the hill where they put the pyramids in CGI on top. That has surged, at least in TripAdvisor's searches. So the interest, at least, was there. Over 579% compared to
Wow.
before. Yeah, exactly. There you can read. They had a little exhibition. This is me with my wife there in the little exhibition in Cleese. Unfortunately, that burned down because a lightning strike hit it.
Wow.
So unfortunately, that's gone now.
Wow.
But yeah, the Cleese is definitely one of the places where they had an insane amount of fallout from tourists that would come there. Split was always popular. Dubrovnik was always popular, but it's those small little outskirts areas where you feel it probably the most.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think that when I have been interviewed by local media usually about what was the impact of Game of Thrones filming in that location, and I always say that I was very lucky when I was doing a travel to London for my PhD, not my PhD, for my master's degree, and I in the London Town Hall City Council communication department, whatever. I met a girl, and when they presented us the visitors that were from Spain, from a master's degree in corporate reputation, that were visiting that communication department of the London City Hall, they said my name, and for me it was crazy because this guy is Game of Thrones. When that girl said when the university, the college send your profiles, I was looking at this profile because this guy is like the Game of Thrones guy, and I'm from Northern Ireland. I think I still have the card of that girl. I don't know if he's still in the London Town Hall. I have never ever talked to her again. But she said I'm from Northern Ireland, and I can tell you we have doubled the number of tourists thanks to Game of Thrones. And that was a girl from there. And
Yeah.
I guess she had the inner data, the town hall data. So I always say that in Belfast they say a 200% increase of tourists related to Game of Thrones. But when I presented the City of Dragons event last year, I was telling to the press, okay, it's easy to double your numbers, but you are at Belfast when you don't have good weather, you don't have good food, you don't have a lot of places like Cáceres or other places in Spain, I think maybe Croatia has. So it's easy
Yeah.
to travel when you are in the down, when you are very down.
Yeah.
When you are at a top place like Península in Spain or Sevilla in Spain, for example, or even Dubrovnik, I would say now, it's very difficult to double those numbers. But um, you can see the
Oh
number.
yeah. Oh no, absolutely. But yeah, as I said, sometimes it's just very hard to say,
Mm,
is it really just Game of Thrones, or is it just
mm,
like that Northern Ireland is mentioned more often? But I mean, that
mm.
could be a direct or indirect impact by Game of Thrones.
No,
Yeah, this is
this
this
would be the
this is
topic. I
this
I
is the
I
number
I
crunching.
I I, I, I could talk for ages because my master's degree is in corporate
Yeah.
reputation. It's about reputation, and the
Hmm.
point is that as you said before, the reputation of a place like Northern Ireland that was previously only before thanks to war and to terrorism and to it was not a good place to visit, or nobody was thinking of visiting that place ever. Or Croatia, as you were saying, Croatia was related with the Balkan War. Younger people in now doesn't know what Balkan War was, but Balkan War was a very the only war in Europe since World War II. It was very hard, and a lot of people died. But thanks to nowadays, nobody thinks about Croatia and thinks about Balkan War. They think about beaches. They say it's now like a bit of competition of Spain because they have beaches like Spain, but it's cheaper than Spain. But
Yeah.
also related to Game of Thrones. I was telling you in the previous chat we had about that. I have a partner in my job that is not a deep compulsive fan of Game of Thrones. He has not read the books. He will not read the books. He's not like the average visitor of Los Terrenos. He just liked the show. And when he decided to go to holidays with his wife, he decided to go to Croatia because Game of Thrones was filmed there. And the
Yeah.
first day, my first day in my job, what I was telling him about Los Terrenos, he was, oh, I will show you the pics of me in Dubrovnik, and he's a 57-year-old that is not the average die-hard fan Game of Thrones, but he wanted to visit Croatia because it's beautiful and Game of Thrones was filmed there. I was reading that
Exactly.
in your PhD. Your PhD, I was reading now the testimony of a lot of people that I am here just because Game of Thrones was filmed here.
Yes,
It was the most
absolutely.
common answer. It was the most common answer.
Yeah, I mean, there was a one particular interesting comment from a person from the US who
Hmm.
said that before he would think that Croatia was like Eastern Europe, but Game of Thrones made them realize it's actually quite pretty there. So
Oh,
you can really see, and I think another person in Northern Ireland said, well, before Game of Thrones, the main thing that I associated with Northern Ireland was the Troubles, was the Northern Ireland conflict. It was like the IRA,
hmm,
the terrorist attacks, the
hmm,
conflict between Protestant and Catholics, and
yeah.
for many people, and I mean that was probably most significantly expressed by people from the UK, from Ireland,
Hmm,
that now they actually realized that the
hmm,
troubles, the Northern Ireland conflict is actually over, because now you have those you have those film productions, you have the you have the tourism come, and you see the nice landscapes. Yes, exactly. Who would have thought 10, 15 years ago to
hmm.
advertise Northern
Hmm.
Ireland with views to die horribly for, which is you could not imagine that, because like it would have been very in very poor taste. But these days, oh, I don't think that some person with a machine gun or a Molotov cocktail will kill you because you're Catholic or Protestant. No, it's
Hmm.
just like, oh yeah, this is where Game of Thrones was filmed. This is just
Hmm.
like, don't you remember how fun the Red Wedding was?
Nah, nah, totally.
No, 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 no. It has done an amazing job also in the self perception of Northern Ireland. They are really happy there that they are associated with something else than conflict, because they were just they felt very misunderstood. Also because the troubles were officially over for the since 1998, but the reputation still remained because it was decades of violence. And similar
Hmm.
with the Balkans, Croatia also had if it wasn't for the Balkan Wars in the 1990s, it was just like, oh, it's Eastern Europe and the Balkans. That's a poor, ugly area anyway, because it was part of the Eastern communist bloc. So it had that kind of reputation for many people around the world. But yeah, this is more the main idea, more the economic impact is more the social and cultural impact. So one aspect of it is kind of how people perceive the place. The other aspect that I'm focusing on is kind of the communities that kind of form around Game of Thrones and that are currently that are visiting there. So this is very much created by a fan phenomenon. It started as a fan phenomenon, became larger and larger because it became a big tourist phenomenon. But we talked about this earlier, and you told me not to spoil things for the podcast. But it's a very communal experience, this Game of Thrones tourism. This is actually the first thing that you show here. That's actually quite good. Because fan communities, they connect with each other. When we have the representatives here of the fan community, you from Spain, Elia and Linda from US and Scandinavia. But generally speaking, you have Game of Thrones fans from all over the world. And we were talking about, should we subtitle this thing, and you speak English, and the listeners and the viewers, will they understand us, or and I said it's one of the things that Game of Thrones has provided the fan community with is a common language, and this is a common visual and performative and cultural language, a pop cultural language, if you will, that is happening in all those places. So everybody kind of knows what the other person is up to, even though they don't understand each other verbally, but they know exactly what's going on. I have a couple of quotes here from people. So there's a German couple I met, and I'm still in contact with in Northern Ireland. So they say there has been no reservations to engage with others because everyone hears for the same reason. That means that there are also no linguistic barriers. We all agree on those impressions and stories from the series that we shared, and all those spots that we have visited, and that's great. And to see that people from different countries still all want to see the same places and share the same interest in the series. I know we had people from LA, Australia, and Taiwan in the group, and there were also people from Italy and China, and everybody comes here together. Everybody comes together to see this, and that's a great thing. I had a couple of guys from India that said they come to Dubrovnik and they claim how amazing it is to be able to find some of their own kind, and they don't mean Indians. They don't mean like people from
fans like them, fans like them.
Exactly, and they feel all like they're all connected. So and the young woman from Italy also said, you can clearly recognize people that are here for the same reason as you, because they have all the same face. So basically, just you can read it from their faces that you share something with these people, and this is a part of this phenomenon that also fascinates me. There's kind of a new global, transnational community kind of forming. This is it doesn't matter where you're from, what language you speak, what color of skin, what creed, what religion you follow. You follow Game of Thrones, and you go there to go to. It's almost, I gotta say, it is as close. Modern fandom is as close to religion, a modern kind of religion as it gets, because
it's amazing. It's amazing.
It's a pilgrimage. People go on a pilgrimage there. If you go to the page 229, I have a lovely juxtaposition between an actual Christian pilgrimage.
2029. Okay.
229.
I'm going now. I know a phenomenon that is like that. That is, here it is.
Yes, this is a photo I took in Jerusalem in 2009 because I was there on a field trip for university. People going down the Via Dolorosa with the cross, but I don't see really much different. I mean, I might offend some people here, so Sorry,
Yeah,
but basically for me and for the people who share
no, but
this experience, it is almost a religious, spiritual experience to just like have
I see
those
your point,
banners.
and I will do another comparison. Sports. I'm a huge sport fan,
Absolutely,
and when you, for example, I am a Real Madrid fan. Real Madrid is a very big club. It's the club, the sport club with more fans around the world in social media, yada yada.
yeah.
Well, I have friends of mine that are Madrid fans that are from Germany and from Austria. In fact, I wasn't thinking about this, but I have a this will be crazy for you. I have a scarf of your country here. This is a scarf of the fans of Alemania and Austria. I think you were expecting this. Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh,
Because
wonderful! That's wonderful.
my fan group, this was it's totally improvised. I just remember that my fan group that is called Primavera Blanca is the symbol of my Spanish of my Real Madrid fan club. It has a lot of members outside the Spain, and there is one called Peña. One section is called Alemania. This is Germany in Spain. Alemania, Austria, and the Alemania Austria section has like 300 people fans. And
Okay,
I have and I will say it later, and it's very funny because one of the guys of my Peña, of my fan group from Austria, he's also he's called Andy, and he's a huge Game of Thrones fan. So sometimes I talk with them not about Madrid, but about Game of Thrones, about the filming. This is the logo of my fan group, Alemania,
okay.
Austria. I think it's crazy. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah,
It's
but
absolutely crazy.
football fandom
I
is a
didn't know.
wonderful
I can't remember.
comparison.
I have the flag of your country in my room. I can't remember that until now. So it just it's here somewhere. So that's crazy. And that's another phenomenon that joins people from these guys they are from other countries. They have my age, or they may be older than me or younger than me. They have males and of course a lot of females. They have people from black people, white people, because in Germany there's a lot of black people from all around, and they are together because they share the same passion. And
Exactly, and this is thanks to I have to say pop culture in this way. It is very
mm,
it can be political, but it's very depoliticized. And what I mean with that is that most people can take part in it. I mean, of course, it's still a very much Western centric thing, because it's like it's
mm,
mainly you have to have a certain amount of capital to be able to
yeah,
participate
yeah,
in
yeah.
pop. Yeah, have a TV, watch stuff
Yeah.
online, and so on.
That's
Of
the
course.
difference with the sport. But with piracy, you can watch Game of Thrones even if you are poor. Like if you can watch, if you are in Africa in a poor country, you can also watch football because it shows in a local
Yeah,
TV. Because so
yeah.
and but I really like I really like your comparison. Uh, Not a religion is a bit is a tricky topic, but it's something that make us connect as a community. I would say that I like the
Yes,
word
and this
community.
is what I'm
I
getting
like
at.
the word community, creating communities that because what I like is that I start talking with you about Game of Thrones, but then we'll one day later we'll be talking about other things that we have in common, but we met thanks to Game of Thrones. But thanks to Game of Thrones,
Absolutely,
we talk about other
absolutely.
things.
Yeah, and then this is I put this religious image there. It's because it's a very easy way of kind of making the to visualize what I mean. People
Mm,
go to to an important place for the community. They come from all over the world. They come together and they join in the same kind of activities. There is this and they do a procession. They have their rituals. They have their common language. And again, it's not about like the vocabulary and the grammar. It's
mm,
about the
mm,
visuals and the things that you do, the things that you wear. You have your
mm.
Game of Thrones shirt. I mean, I have here my my shirt
Oh,
here.
oh, I
I
love
I
it.
got that from my from as a goodbye gift, a farewell gift from an internship in Northern Ireland, where I worked for the
Mm,
National Museums of Northern Ireland, and they gave,
mm.
because they knew that I did my degree in Game of Thrones, they just like gave me a gave me a Game of Thrones themed shirt.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
Nah, it's great. It's great, and that's why. I think that's why we are doing this kind of stuff, because Christoph, well, he has studied a lot. He's an academical. He has a PhD. He has a regular job. But he doesn't live thanks to Game of Thrones. He doesn't pay the bills thanks to Game of Thrones. He's not. He doesn't pay the rent thanks to Game of Thrones. I myself too. I am not a YouTuber. I am not earning exactly a lot of money thanks to Los Terrenos. I have my other, as I say, my muggle job. This is my muggle job, my non-magical job, who pays me the bills and the rent and the food and whatever. So we do this because it's our passion. Because it's
Oh,
our passion.
absolutely,
Because,
absolutely.
and thanks to this passion, I am now talking with a guy from Austria, and later today we'll have a chat with two guys from Italy. And I was texting yesterday to Elliot. He's from US, and I was sending a meme to the French guys about the meets in Spain and France and whatever. And we connect to people from different countries with different origins, who with maybe have different political ideologies. I don't know, but we have one shared passion that we share, and that's Game of Thrones, George R. Martin world, and this beautiful thing that changed my life. I said, I don't know if I've said that. And Tower of the Hand, the website,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Essays website, they did a book, like, I don't know, 8-7 years ago, about it was called, it was a Tower of the Hand, a Flight of Sorrows book. It was the name of the book. It was, I think it is still available for ebook to download, but they also did a physical edition of the book, a print copy. I think I have it somewhere. I will show it later. But I collaborated with the book, not writing an essay, but like writing something, and they did like a kind of contest, and the most chosen, the most voted election would, that sentence would appear in the back of the book, and that image of a tower would appear in the cover of the book. And they selected my quote and my tower. And just talk a bit, and I will find the book. Just talk a bit and talk to the audience about,
Okay,
I don't know,
okay.
whatever.
All right. Well, what should I
I will be
talk
in a minute.
about
I will be in a
otherwise?
minute.
Okay, well,
Do a
for
monologue.
everyone, yeah, all right, my monologue. So my concluding words is, yeah. So if anyone is interested in this dissertation, it's freely available online. So if you just
I
if
was
you just
fast. I
Google
was fast.
item, oh right, I just wanted to tell everyone how to find my dissertation. So basically, if you Google my name, that should be
Mm.
enough. But if you want to be a bit more specific, travels from Winterfell to King's Landing. This is the title of the dissertation. I also published a couple of other chapters. One is about to be published soon, I hope, and they will not be publicly accessible for free, but if you message me, which you can do through ResearchGate or academia.edu, I'm more than willing to just like send you a PDF copy of it.
People will be into what I was telling. This is the book Tower of the Hand, Flight of Sorrows. I have one
Okay.
of the very limited physical editions that they did. They choose the tower because I got votes on Facebook and like. But the good thing is that they use my sentence for the back of the book, and I don't know if people
Oh,
can
right.
can see it.
Yeah,
And they
I can
say,
see.
the point is that I didn't say has changed not only my life. I typed has not changed my life, but they rewrite that, and the actor sentence is right, because has changed my life. The A Song of Ice and Fire has changed my life.
Oh,
but
it definitely
but
has
the
changed a lot of lives. I
but the
mean,
way I
I
explain
did.
it, I enjoy the series of books. Like, before, I have discovered a new book, new website, theories, essays, discussion, and most of all, an amazing fandom. And that's for me
Yes.
the key. We are part of a fandom. We are part of a fan group or fan communities that share the same passion, and that's what at the end change your life. You met amazing people. Some people even met the partners,
Absolutely.
their wife, husband, whatever, even their more deep friends, because they share the same passion.
Oh, I met several people who went on their honeymoon for Game of Thrones travel, for example, because they were just like they were sharing this Game of Thrones passion so strongly together. So I
Mm.
was sitting with a couple, yeah, and then I found someone. I did not meet them, but one of the tour guides in Croatia in Split told me that at some point somebody dressed as Jon Snow and somebody dressed as Daenerys in
Oh,
Dubrovnik met
oh,
each other. They didn't know each
oh!
other before, but then they went
Wow,
the rest of the journey together.
wow, wow! Love wins at the end. Wow, that's cool. That's cool. That's cool. Even in a world as tragic and horrible as Westeros, love can win at the end. Wow, wow,
Yeah, yeah. No, and again, it's changed lots of lives. I mean, lots of people like make their living through fandom, like with being YouTubers and so on, or being
wow.
authors that write about it. I definitely earned a bit of a living for a while because
Mm,
my PhD, I was funded, so I basically was paid to do my research.
mm,
And of course, I mean, it is like for the rest of my life, Game of Thrones will be a really major and important part. It will
mm,
be an insanely important part because this is my part of my education, of my research, and of my contribution to further kind of knowledge on fandom communities and cultural heritage sites and pop cultural discourse and social media discourse and so on. So and this will just like remain for my entire life an important part. So Game of Thrones is part of what I am.
no, absolutely. It changes, it transforms our life, and well, we won't repeat it the same again and again and again. I think the idea was clear, and well, Christoph, I think it was amazing to talk with you about this. And I hope the audience, I don't know what will be the audience of this completely, but it was amazing talking about this and exploring the academical points of your research, a very long, a very detailed research, talking with a lot of people, talking with visiting a lot of countries, doing a lot of different kind of research, not just the social, cultural impact, but also talking about the heritage, talking about the history of the places. I think it's unique. It's unique. I think at least that I know, nobody ever in the world has done something like that. I know people that has done a master's degree. The master's degree focus, or the project for the master's degree focus on something related to Game of Thrones. I have a colleague of mine who did she did an architectural analysis of several Game of Thrones buildings. I have known people have done for the just the degree, the project for the degree, something related to Game of Thrones, but to do actually a PhD, a 350 document, for me it's crazy. And that's, and I cannot talk in the name of the community, but as a representative member of some of the community, I would say leaders of the community or whatever, I would say just thank you. Say thank you, Christoph,
Well,
because your
thank you for the
your
conversation.
your,
I always like to talk about my own stuff because
your
this is
work
how
is for the
academics do.
your work is for the ages. Your work is for the ages, and I think maybe in the future, people will look at your PhD like as one of the reference for how to study the social cultural impact of a phenomenon like Game of Thrones and how it impacted the real life location and real life people. So thank you, Christoph. I not only consider you a friend or colleague, but I also consider you something to look up to. Or have you
Oh, that's really kind. I mean, I
you
find
have the courage and also the willness and the hard work and the routine and the sacrifices, because it's not easy to do a research like that. So I want really to, in a recorded thing, I want to say to you, thank you, Christoph, because what you did was amazing and it's a reference for the future. So thank you,
all
thanks
right.
a lot, Christoph.
Thank you very much.
Do you have something more else to say, or we'll just close this stream
I think
recording
we
for
cannot just
tracking?
close it, but I mean, it's just can only return all the great compliments that you gave me, and also without my PhD, we wouldn't know each other. So that's
Yes.
always a plus.
Of course. Okay, well, it was amazing. We have been talking for 100 minutes. I think that's
Oh
a lot
my
of
goodness.
minutes.
Oh my
Almost
goodness.
100 minutes. 83 minutes. That's a lot of minutes.
Seven hells. Seven hells.
Almost as long as a football match, a soccer match. So it's enough. I think it's enough. So
And almost as exciting.
almost exciting. Well, it was great. It was great. Well, thank you very much to all the
All
people,
right.
especially to all the people who have watched that 80
Yeah,
minutes without stopping.
especially for everyone who's still here.
Yeah. That's crazy. And thanks a lot. Okay. Well, thank
All
you very
right,
thank you
bye.
much and goodbye. Bye.
Bye.